And so her point in that is when we become overly familiar and connected to somebody, there's sort of a dampening of the eroticism. There's a way to re-achieve that or to ignite that. And that sort of becomes something where you emotionally distance yourself to an extent and sort of create a space for there to be strangeness and difference between you. That way it sort of reignites the unfamiliar. And so that would be my first advice is check out that book and consider that your relationship has quality aspects that you value in your little love potion, but there's ways to actually build up the passion and the eroticism side to kindle that. It sounds like it's something that hasn't been there before, so they're trying to start it for the first time. Now, that's what a dude thinks. Let's get some female perspective on that. Sydney, what do you think about that?
Well, not from a marriage and family perspective, but I'm just kind of wondering, is she settling in some way? I mean, kind of it sounds like there's might be something missing to that, and what needs are not being met that,
She's playing it safe, it sounds like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense. I mean, if she's trying something different, and because essentially it sounds like she's taking the opposite role of what the guy usually takes. So,
Right.
She says that usually it's the male that goes into something half-heartedly, and I would kind of wonder if she is also kind of going into it half-heartedly, but
Right.
just kind of a fear, almost like, well, I don't want to go into the same old relationship that I always used to be in. So I applaud you for doing something different and trying something different and trying to date a man that you wouldn't typically date. But I guess my thought was just, are you doing it half-heartedly? Are you putting in everything?
Yeah, no, here's a change of direction for both of you guys. Is there a factor in this where you might look at the story and go, this person's growing up? You used to date bad boys who had no emotional depth and were not there for you, but it was physically sensational because they're exciting and different, and there's this curiosity about it, and you're attracted to it. And now you're doing a grown-up thing. You're finding a responsible, decent guy, but you don't feel that firework charisma. Is there a part of this where you might look at this if this was your client and say, hey, this is okay. It's okay that you don't have the old explosive sexual experience. This is growing up. And now you're settling in a sense, but you're maturing. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think so. But I also think, for some reason, based on this little paragraph, it sounds like, there's some hesitancy in that and just kind of exploring that, what is underneath that. Not that it's right or wrong or to stay in it or not to stay in it. There's no right or wrong to it. But also, kind of what's her motivation in this too? That would be my question.
Yeah.
And how long have they been together? How long has she been trying this?
Right. Sounds like it's a new relationship.
Right. So maybe that would, going back to your family therapy perspective, Jim, is there some kind of a deadline that you would then set to have expectations of when things are going to get better? Like how long would somebody in this situation stay in this relationship before deciding like, oh, well, maybe this just isn't there, and maybe I need to find somebody that meets all three of the categories?
I think that's fair. That's a good question. So if this was my client, if she came in and said, so here's the thing, like I'm concerned, I guess the first thing I want to do is normalize it. And I want to say, okay, so you're used to sexual greatness, but you were unsatisfied in the relationships, right? So we're changing things and the little love formula changes, right? So we've rebalanced and recalibrated. The first thing I want her to do is like give this an honest try. And it sounds like that's what she's doing, because her advice question is, how can I teach myself to be more sexually attracted to this guy? I think all of us feel a little uncomfortable with that language, but that's why I reference Esther Perel, because there is a way to sort of intentionally reapproach erotic passion. And a lot of us don't think there is any way to do that. We just think it is or it isn't. But that's not the case. You can train your human appetites and your human desires and focus them. You can't completely fundamentally change them, but there is a way to sort of engage them intentionally and maybe redirect them a little bit.
Right.
And she mentions he provides the needs, the intimacy needs, and then, I guess the closeness or the physical touch portion. And I'm wondering, was she deficit in those things in her prior relationships? And is, this person feeling a lot of those unmet needs and kind of exploring that a little bit more?
Absolutely.
Too.
Good advice, folks. I like it. It's so nice to have a female perspective in here because now I say things and if she doesn't wince, I'm like, okay, this is good. It's going to be
instant
okay.
feedback.
It's that instant feedback of the female listener.
Yep.
All right, so I'll read the next one. Our next question comes in from somebody by the tag name Throwaway Beard, and the question is titled, "My girlfriend of 3 years quit her high-paying job a year and a half ago and wants me to get a second job to support her." And this is what he writes. "A year and a half ago, my girlfriend decided to quit her high-paying job to pursue her dream of being a hairdresser. Suffice to say, she isn't bringing in the amount of clients she wants, so money isn't coming in like it used to for her. I've always been financially responsible, and in the past, I was able to put money in savings after paying all the bills. Because she doesn't drive, I have to take her to and from work and run whatever errands she needs. She doesn't cook, so I usually end up buying the food, which is more financial stress. Then she decides to tell me I need to put in more effort in our relationship because I'm not bringing in money for us to go anywhere, so she tells me to go get a second job. But I think that since I'm employed full-time and going to school, and since she only works 20 to 25 hours a week, she should have to get the second job. Her response is that the man should take care of the woman. Am I wrong for not wanting a second job when she has the time to get one, or is she being unreasonable?"
Okay, that's a good question. I think in any relationship, there's going to be sacrifice, right? So we always talk about how a relationship is not going to be split evenly 50-50 all the time. There's going to be days where it's 60-40, days where it's 70-30, sometimes even 80-20, with the idea that over time there is a homeostasis that's achieved and we're getting to 50-50, right? So when I thought about this, as I read this, my immediate thought was kind of thinking about how we can, in a relationship, make a sacrifice to support someone's dream. If I'm in a relationship and my significant other wants to be an actress and she wants to pursue acting, I want to support that. And that means that there are going to have to be some sacrifices that are made, and maybe I have to pick up the slack a little bit because I love this person and I want to help them get to their goal. Now, that being said, there also then has to be some sort of balance going the other way. And there's always things that can be done other than, monetary compensation, other than, if that means that he has to pick up another job, then is there something hopefully that she can do to kind of recognize his sacrifice to give back to the relationship? And, if I can't help financially here, then I will do something else. I will take on a bigger responsibility in some other aspects.
All right, so this is a great question to have a female therapist on. He says a very important statement here. He says that his wife, his girlfriend, says the man should take care of this. This is your responsibility. It's in your wheelhouse. What is your reaction to that?
Well, my first initial thought was, he has the basic human right to say no.
Right.
Yeah. It sounds like, he's feeling overwhelmed, and they both have different expectations at this point, but for him, he's saying, am I wrong for not wanting a second job? It's like, I think he's, I don't want to put, opinion in it, but I think he can say no if he wants to say no.
Yeah.
And he can give her choices. She has choices as well, and she's only choosing to work 20 or 25 hours a week. But at the same time, talking about what is their expectation of this and what is their expectation of their roles as well.
So I'm going to say this right now. You're both better therapists than me because you're both sitting here saying, I'm not going to bring my opinion into this, but I'm coming in with a hammer. I'm furious. Okay. And I'm holding my rage. So I'm not going to try to get all Bernie Sanders on this thing. All right. But we live in a different world. Okay. And we do not live in the world of the 1940s anymore where the fella just goes down to the Ford factory and he comes back with a nice fat paycheck and the wife can stay home like Donna Reed and the kids all get raised right. We just don't have that economy. So I think it's two incomes pretty much to survive these days. And, whenever I hear millennial people that sometimes talk about this and they say, oh, I want to go back to the old way. The man needs to do this. Listen, that's wonderful. Find a time machine and go back to a time when that was even economically feasible. At this point, we survive or we don't. And, for this guy to be doing things and for her to be pulling back and saying, you know what, I'm going to cut it down to 20 hours a week. And I think you should pick up another job so I can have more free time. No. I think that whenever I hear somebody say, I want to retire in my 20s or 30s, no, we do not live in that world. You don't get to do that. If you have kids at home, we can have the conversation, but that isn't even going on. So to me, I'm looking at this fella and going, oh, buddy, stand up for yourself, draw this line, create a no boundary. She can say, hey, that's not what I want. Then my value system is that a man should do this. Okay, fine. You guys have discovered an area where you depart in your fundamental philosophies, but have that fight. That is my opinion. I'm keeping it out there. I'm not keeping it to myself.
No, yeah. I agree with a lot of that, but also, for him to be honest with what he's feeling. Yes. If he's feeling like that and he wants to put his foot down and say, this is my personal boundary, and This is where I say no, and I'm not gonna, put my own emotional, physical, mental health at risk by doing all these things. I'm just not gonna do it. That's okay. And then it's gonna be up to her to respect that or not, whatever.
So really, this boils down to expectations and boundaries. Being able to communicate effectively, what are our expectations in this relationship, and what are the things that I'm willing to sacrifice and assist with, and when do I draw the line? Getting back to the idea of this is kind of her goal, her dream. Well, that's great, but then at some point there probably has to be some boundary of, what keeps us from going over the edge in the opposite extreme, to where I'm completely carrying all of the responsibilities,
right,
while you pursue your dream.
Yeah, and I get so angry because I'm like this thing. Okay, she doesn't drive, she doesn't cook, she's cutting down her workload so that she can have more time. And but I guess there's a part of me, Nick, that I hear this and go, well, you are starting a business. You're trying to become a cosmetologist. Even if you only are working 25 hours a week, that doesn't mean that you're sitting on your butt the other 20. You might be out there hustling, trying to get it done, marketing. So there's only one side of the story here. So I'm going to take a deep breath. Okay,
but you know
Jim's
what?
Calming down.
This sounds like a resentment waiting to happen.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good point. Yeah, if this is not talked about and dealt with, this could be something that could come up again and again for years.
Yeah. So I guess all three of the therapists in the room agree that even though there's a lot of room to discuss this, there's an opportunity to assert a boundary, to describe very sincerely how you feel, and bring that to the table. And don't retreat from it. Own your truth, because if you just accept this, I think that Sydney and Nick are right. You're gonna grow resentment, and you're gonna sit on your hands, and eventually this is gonna become poison in the relationship. So at least address it honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, our next one comes to us from Nicholas90, and he writes, how do you break free from the romantic/sexual fantasies of porn, movies, music, books, etc., and start viewing yourself and others through a more realistic lens?
I love this question. So in my private practice, the number one category of people that I treat are men and women who have sexual addictions and compulsive behaviors that have to do with porn, erotic fiction, and just misbehaving sexually. It's become a problem in their life. And so I'm really glad this person's writing in and saying, hey, I acknowledge that a delusion forms whenever I'm reading these books like 50 Shades of Grey, or I'm watching porn too often. I start to have a misrepresented reality. Did you guys watch Friends back in the 90s? Remember that show?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, you did,
yeah.
Nick. Nick was from Iowa, so they're just now getting Friends in Iowa.
Okay, we have some listeners from Iowa. So send your mail. Send your mail to Jim.
Yeah. More hate mail comes to Jim every week.
All of those from the Midwest.
There's an episode of Friends when the guys accidentally get pornography on their TV, and they get like a free channel, and they're scared to turn off the TV or turn the channel because they're scared they might lose it. So they watch it 24 hours a day. And a week later, Joey goes to the bank, and he comes home and he looks at Chandler and goes, hey, I went to the bank today. He goes, what happened? He goes, well, there was a pretty female teller, and I asked her to get me, my cash or whatever. And he says, well, then what happened? He says, well, she gave me the money. He goes, and then what happened? He goes, nothing. I walked out. And he goes, she didn't invite you back to the vault to have sex? And he goes, no, it didn't happen. What the? And they're like, that's so weird. And I'm like, today I was at the grocery store and nobody offered to have sex with me. And they're both like, wait a minute. Like, we're having a very fake view of reality. I think that we're starting to watch too much of this. And I think that they put a fine point on this a long time ago, that if you're engaging in the erotic fictions or, pornography and stuff, it's not like this inherently going to ruin your life kind of thing. But anything in balance, right? And so if you're overdoing it, you can create a delusion. And so the writer's acknowledging that and saying, how do you address that? This kind of resembles a conversation Nick and I had last week about video game addiction. My advice is to begin with a detox. We have to recalibrate your brain and kind of refamiliarize you with what is normal human interaction, what is a real relationship, what is real sexuality that's not hyperbolic and caricature and fictionalized. And so